In this tutorial, you will be learning how to create a mega menu navbar using HTML and CSS. So as you can see in this example, we've got these normal links in the navbar, and then when they hover over the drop down, this huge menu pops up which has got different sections. Each section is a single column with rows to contain the links. You can contain anything in these individual columns, pictures, anything that you want. You can have them the width that you want as well. In this example, we use CSS grids to achieve these columns. And if you want an example of these mega menus in practice, then here's an example. Obviously, mine's really simple in comparison to this, but yeah, it's the same sort of idea. So they've got 3 columns. When they hover over each selection, a drop down comes up with different columns, and each column is their own rows, which is related to the column title. And so this is what you'll be creating in this video. Stay tuned to find out how to do it. Okay, so I've already set up the HTML boilerplate code beforehand, and all I've done is simply created a div of a class of navbar, which contains 2 links. None of this is styled at the moment because we haven't created the style sheet yet. So here are the 2 links here unstyled. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to import the font that we're going to be using. It's going to be called, well no, it is called Open Sans, and you can find it on Google Fonts. So you click on the first thing that comes up on Google, click the regular version, copy this link into the head of the HTML document. I'll just write a comment here, so I know what the 2 links are for. And then we copy the CSS rules, but we need to actually create the CSS file. Call it styles.css. New file, matching name, styles.css. And we're going to select all elements to remove the default margin and padding that our browser can sometimes give elements by default. We want to move that by setting both margin and padding to 0. We'll also say box sizing, border box, just to help out with the positioning of elements, and then we'll copy the font family attribute that we copied from Google Fonts. Alright, so we currently have this navbar which we need to style. So it's got a class of navbar, so we select the class. We'll say the background colour, we'll set it to be black. It's a nice stark colour. What we need to do now is we're going to style the A tags within the navbar. So to do that we use hierarchical selector. We'll say float left to display the tags horizontally, so inline, but we don't use display inline because that adds spacing between the elements and we don't want that. So we use this float method instead. And we'll say font size, increase up to 16 pixels, colour white, so a nice contrasting colour to the black background of the navbar. Text align, recenter because we're about to add padding. Padding 14 pixels to the right, 16 pixels to the top. And we'll say text decoration none to remove the underline that's given to the text elements by default. Now if you do this now, we will count a problem. We can close that now. So the problem is the background of the navbar isn't showing. We know because it's meant to be black. The reason being is because the child link elements are set to float left, and this takes the A tags out of the HTML flow. And now because of this, the navbar has no height to it. And because it has no height to it, there's no background, because it needs a height, obviously, to actually display pixels. So the solution to this is to set overflows to hidden. So this will reinstantiate the height in relation to its child elements, which are floated, and now we can see the black background has been appeared. It's been created. Okay, so now we need to create the actual drop down rather than just these standard link tags. So inside the navbar, but below these A tags, we're going to create a new div which will contain all of our drop down content. So create a new div, give it a class. Drop down, we'll call it the class, and inside that the first element will be a div with a class of, we'll call it drop btn. The text inside will simply be drop down, and we need a symbol to show the user that they can actually, that this is a drop down button, so when they hover over it, it will display the drop down. We could use font awesome icons, but I'm simply just going to use this default Unicode value, which is available to all UTF-8 encoded documents. So we just copy it like that. You can just search for it. If you type in that Unicode value, you should find it. And now below the drop down btn, we need to create the drop down content, which will be displayed when the user hovers over the drop down button, which we just created. So we'll create a new div, give it a class, call it drop down content, and then inside that the first element will be h1, and we'll call it header. We'll also give it a class of we'll call it drop down. We'll call it drop down header. Okay, now if we go on our document, yeah, as you can see, we need to style some of this out before we proceed with the markup. Now the first thing that we're going to style is just a simple drop down container. We're going to set it to float left to match the link elements, which are its siblings. Oh, sorry, not link. Float left and also overflow hidden. Setting matches the styling as set out before in the A tags. And then we'll style the drop down btn. So we'll say drop down, but we'll say drop down btn inside of drop down. That will have a font size which matches the font size as specified above, which is 16 pixels. The color will be white to contrast the black background. Padding, again, same as before. So we're setting it to basically match the link elements. That's what we're doing. So it should look, there should be no difference between the styling of the link elements and the drop down button. And then we'll say drop down content. We'll say, at the moment we'll say position absolute. So absolute to its parent relative container, which is just, in this instance, it'll be the document. So we'll say width, take up 100% of the document. We'll also give it a box shadow. We'll say 0 pixels horizontal offset, 8 pixels vertical offset, because there's no point giving it a horizontal offset because it's going to take up the entire width of the document. Blur will be 16 pixels, the spread will be 0 pixels, and then we'll give it a color. We'll use RGBA method to give it some transparency because the A stands for alpha. So 3 zeros to indicate black, and then 0.2 opacity. Now if we refresh now, yeah, so currently this isn't ideal. The reason being is because, well, there's two reasons. What we need to do is, we need to set left, so it matches with the left of the document. So now it will be pulled straight towards the left, so that it will move the horizontal scrolling bar now. We also need to set z index to 1. Okay, and there's also the problem that with the wrong selector. So instead of selecting drop down twice, this needs to be drop btn. Select the drop button inside of the drop down class, and then yes, that should be the solution. Yeah, so now that's appeared, which pushes this down. What we're going to do now is we're going to set the display of this to be grid, so we can set up the columns later on. And the way that we do that is using grid template columns. We'll use the repeat method. We'll create 3 columns of 1 faction. So the grid will consist of 3 columns, each of equal proportion. But the drop down header will take up all of the width of all the horizontal width of the grid, so all 3 columns. So we need to style the drop down header now. So we'll say grid column, the first line's the 4th line. The reason being is because a grid of 3 columns will consist of 4 lines, because 2 parallel lines will create the first column. Add another line, you've got 2 columns. Add another line, horizontal line. You've got 3 columns. So there's 4 lines in total. And we need to give padding, we'll say 16 pixels. We'll say background color will be something which I found, something which I've already pre-specified. So 2979FF is the hex code. It's a nice blue color. And then text align. The text color will be white, the text align will be center. Refresh the page now, this looks good. As you can see, it takes up, even though the grid is 3 columns wide, because this takes up all 3 columns, which is the reason why it's fully 100% width of the document. Okay, so now we can add more content. Now we can actually start adding the columns in the drop down. So below the drop down header, we'll create a new div. Give it a class of drop down column. Whoops. Inside we'll say, well, this will be the first column. We need 3 in total. Well, I mean in this tutorial, in this example anyway. So, sorry, section 1. We'll call that. We'll give it h2 tag section 1, and then we'll create an a tag. We'll set it to nowhere, and then link 1, and then we'll just copy this a tag 2 more times, change the number, and we'll also copy this column 2 more times, so we've got 3 columns inside of the grid, because that's what we specified. And then change the values of these, section 2, section 3. Now we need to style the columns. If you refresh, it will look, yeah, it's not looking how you want it to, so we need to style those. First of all, we need to set, because currently it's at the start, the headers. So we'll say drop down column. We'll say text align center. Adding 10 pixels, background color, again something which I pre-specified. You can choose your own color, E0, E0, E0 one more time, and then we need to choose style the A tags inside of the drop down column. We'll move its default float. By default, the A tags have a float value, which stops it from being aligned center. We'll say color to black to contrast with the greyish background. Padding, be 16 pixels. Text decoration, none, to remove the underline. And display. Block, to make sure they are displayed vertically. So yeah, so now as you can see this looks good. There's a few more touches though to make it look more dynamic. We're going to say drop down color A, and then we're pseudo selector hover, and we're going to change the background color to a darker sort of grey, just so the user's got a visual reference of which link element they're currently selecting. So we refresh the page. Yeah, so now it highlights the link when they hover over it. And now what we need to do is we need to give this top navbar a visual reference as well, like we've given these ones, where the background changes. So we'll say navbar, use child selector to select only the A tag elements that are a direct child of the navbar, because otherwise it will select the A elements that are in the drop down content as well. We don't want that. And we'll put a comma to select the button as well. So we'll say drop down hover, just in case you want another drop down, but currently you've only got one drop down button. Just the reason for that. Sorry, drop btn, and then we'll say background color for this, nice blue color, 2979 ff. Now refresh the page. Yep, same color as that actually, the header. And now obviously we only want this mega menu to be displayed when they hover over this drop down. So the solution to that is change display content to none. So by default it's invisible. And then when they hover over the button, so we'll say drop down hover, drop btn, display grid. So now when they hover over, okay, that's not working. Oh yeah, because it's not drop down. Yeah, sorry, it's drop down because the drop down button is inside of drop down, and so is all the drop down content. It will be drop down content. So we want the drop down. The drop down button's already visible, but the drop down content isn't. So we want to make the drop down content visible. So yeah, now it's working. Now finally, this is a bit squished. So on mobile views this isn't going to look very good. This mega menu, 3 columns, ideally it should just be 1 column or stacked on top of each other. So to solve that on small screen sizes, we'll add a media query. We'll set it to be max width 600 pixels, so it can be no larger than 600 pixels. We'll say drop down content will now only have 1 column, which is all of the width, and we'll say the drop down header. Obviously it can't take up the space between line 1 and line 4 because there's only 1 line now. Well, there's only 2 lines actually. The opening horizontal line of the column and the closing. So we'll say just start at line 1. And now so now it's stacked on top of each other, all the different sections. So yeah, if you found this video useful, then please like and subscribe. You'll do me a huge favour, and you'll also show your appreciation. And if you have any queries, or you want me to clarify on a certain topic that I covered, then don't hesitate, post your comments in the comments box below, and I'll answer all your queries to the best of my ability. Okay, thank you for watching, peace out.